How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I hope I hope I can tell you anything that you don't know, but it's all out there. So, but
Yeah,
you know,
well, actually, there's like a lot of stuff that people don't know yet. I'm actually part of like a group that wants to show their appreciation for the film, all the behind the scenes facts, and some of it go unknown. So it's a great opportunity to talk to people who worked on the film.
yeah, actually, I was very surprised because it's all coincidence that Justin, it's been, I think it's over 20 years. It's like
Yeah,
maybe
24
25,
years.
24 years since, and but I started working on it, in '97. So, um,
Mm.
everybody calls it '98, but that's just because it was released in '98. But
Yeah.
yeah, but at the time it was, that the call went out about it. Everybody was kind of scratching their heads because a few years before that, we had been hearing people talking about Stan Winston's doing a version of
Yeah, in
of,
'94, I
of
think.
Godzilla. Yeah, and I mean, I had heard that as early, yeah, because it was around the time that the '94 earthquake had happened, and I was there. I remember I was working at this one shop, ADI, and somebody had said, "Hey, I got some information about this new Godzilla that Stan Winston's is supposed to do," and this guy
Mm.
started blabbing about it in the shop, and it kind of got around, but it kind of bit the guy in the ass because he had gotten the information because his girlfriend had worked for the publicity company that was representing Stan Winston, and this was supposed to be a super big secret.
Mm.
And unfortunately, the word got around from this guy around the shop, and then it eventually went to somebody who was closely associated with Stan, and he gave Stan a call. And like within the hour, this guy and his girlfriend were both fired from their respective jobs just because talk of a new Godzilla, an American Godzilla film, was
Wow.
just mind blowing. And and the reason why I'm telling you this part is just how much of a coveted thing it was. That
Yeah.
an American version of Godzilla could even be considered. And and just the idea that somebody had mentioned it, and I mean, it was kind of, I'm not quite sure if it was public knowledge, but it was within the business. We'd already we'd already known that something was brewing. But
Yeah.
the idea that I'm not quite sure, but I think this person intimated that he had seen a picture of one of the maquettes, and and if you go like on the Reddit Godzilla '98 or even the Godzilla site on Reddit, right now they readily show the picture, but
Mm.
that was almost 25 years ago. So yeah, I mean, you can get access to that picture now, and even when I worked at Stan's in '08, which was like 10 years after the 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 version that I worked on for
Mm.
for Patrick Tatopoulos. Um, I was at Stan's at the time working on, I think it was like stuff for Iron Man in '08, and on top of one of the foam ovens, that there's the maquette of Godzilla from '94. The
Oh,
one that
wow.
people kind of they kind of like. It was controversial in itself because he, to me, he, she, it, they, them. whatever it identified as. Um, you could hardly tell if it was male, female. It was smooth.
Yeah,
What
the
is it they call?
98 one is a little ambiguous. But like Patrick even said that he sculpted female genitalia on his Godzilla.
Right, right. So my point is, uh, some years down the road, which ended up being like 3 to 4 after, all that hubbub had happened and Stans didn't do it. Um, the word got out. I was working for Rick Baker at the time, and we were winding down on a show. I forgot what show it was. There were so many, and I got a call from the former supervisor of the mold shop there, and he said he was, he was supervisor for the building crew on the new Godzilla film, and the word had gotten out that people were getting, hired left and right, practically pulling people out of shops because it was like the highest rate that anybody in our business had heard was being offered to people just to get on that show. Because Patrick wanted, as he said, he wanted, like the best crews that he would get from the best shops.
Yeah.
And so I got the call direct, and they said, I hear you're getting laid off. And I said, yeah, I'm getting laid off today. And it was like Friday, and I was, he says, well, come on board. And by Monday I was at Patrick's. Me and Steve Wang got called at the same time, I guess. And so we both went there. And,
That's
Steve
awesome.
was there. Steve was there to do painting, which, Steve was very well known for his painting, but more so his sculpting. But so we were, we're old, we're old kaiju fans going back from when we were kids, like when we were little kids and stuff. And so the idea of a new Godzilla, it just kind of was like we were all wondering what was going on with this. So of course we both decided, yeah, let's do it, and so we went there at Sony Studios. They had a shop already running. I mean, we both came on. We didn't start with the show. When it started, we just kind of came in because we were both. I think Steve. I can't remember if Steve was working on his Guyver 2 film, or just finished it. But I was currently working at Rick's. I guess maybe Steve had just. No, okay. Steve was doing his stuff back in '94 and '95 and stuff like that. So for some reason, both of us just became available, and it was just coincidence. So when we went there, of course, the first thing is we saw the design, and right then and there, it kind of like hit us like, wow, that looks pretty cool. That really does look pretty cool. And we both kind of looked at each other and they go, but why are they calling it Godzilla? And
that's a common thing you'll see with a lot of the community and even people in the industry that like first saw it. So you came on after they had already done all the designs and some of the sculptures?
Yeah, it was in full production. There were people that were doing the foam sculpting of, like, I think it was, I depending on what size it was supposed to be, we were they were there working on, I think it was like maybe a quarter scale or smaller, maybe a 10. Well, it was definitely, somewhere at least in the quarter scale range there in the shop, and it went all the way up to the ceiling on what they were sculpting on, and So was it? Yeah, I can't exactly remember the scale, but there's pictures of it,
Mhm.
and and uh, and like I said, both me and Steve just kind of said, "Wow!" And then when we saw the drawings that had been done, and I think it was Jake Garber,
Mhm.
uh, if I've got that correct, he actually kind of sort of fleshed out the maquette on it, under, of course, Patrick's direction on it. And I would say to me the thing about it was that the back scales. I don't know what they call those fins.
Yeah,
To
the
me, that
scoot.
was those were the only things that just screamed Godzilla to me.
Mhm.
But otherwise, I kind of looked at it like, well, what is that? Is that like an iguana based form,
Yeah.
or and we were both just kind of trying to figure it out and stuff. But then at the same time, we figured already. It's like, well, if they're going to do a version, they're gonna go different with it. They're gonna do an
Mhm.
American concept, you know, uh, and American only meaning like a whole different thing than what had been already established for like you know by that time over 50 years or something like that, or I mean 40 years.
Yeah.
um you know
I might
so
wanted one more grounded, more realistic. He said, and that was like the overall tone he went with for his direction, with a character that at that time had been, established for maybe over 40 years. I think he said.
yeah, 40 years, because that was in the 50s and we were in the 90s, and but there were things I liked about it. So I
Mhm.
still like it. I mean, I just thought that Godzilla was, calling it that was, we knew that the Japanese weren't gonna, we pretty much figured they weren't gonna take too kindly to it, and for me as a, both Steve and I, obviously as young Asian kids, uh, you know, either whether we were still back in Asia or we're in the United States, we just had
Mhm.
certain visions of the way the traditional look of it would be, and we knew there would be a bit of a change. Uh,
Yeah.
and by that time, we pretty much saw what the Stan version looked like, and so my thing was I was hoping they were going to make it a little more, I don't know, more textured, like in the rough. And when I saw it, I mean, it did follow a concept of kaiju that was established in Japan, being that it was a man in a suit,
Yeah.
and this definitely was a, sort of a sleek 1990s approach towards man in a suit, with
Mhm.
a lot of the new innovations in creating monster forms on and deciding to do it, on what was more accurately a humanoid form, with of course the differences being in the in the hands, the claws, the legs, especially
Yeah.
the legs, and and they had specialists, discussing about how even the legs. There was a guy named Kevin Molman who yeah, he has a prosthetic leg. He kind of became quite expert at how to make prosthetic legs, better prosthetic
Mhm.
legs for people at the time, and then getting specifically called because of his expertise in setting up a system so that people, the guys that were going to be wearing the suits uh, would have these legs made out of metal and carbon fiber, using like the state of the art approach towards it. And I don't know what you call that leg form, but it did follow more of the dinosaur sort of thing, and I like that. That was something that I like, and as far as me for working on mold stuff, and for Steve to work on painting the bodies that were being created, from foam latex combined with with inner suits for cooling and stuff, and the prosthetic legs, and it was still mechanically based inside, but it was all practical effects, radio controlled movements and things like that. But things have gotten more serious, and so yeah. Well, my main thing was I was just like what do they call us besides shop monkeys? Lab tech. I didn't have the glory of being, a sculptor or a painter or any of that stuff, at the time. I was just, but I did fiberglass. I did, polyester fiberglass, but I also did epoxy resins. So we made these big, that was an innovation at the time that was kind of going, late 80s, early 90s. All of a sudden, people, instead of doing the standard polyester resin molds, what we call fiberglass, they started innovating with the use of epoxy resins. And the point of that is that it just made a better, stronger, long-lasting mold. And it worked very well with foam latex. And at the time, silicone wasn't. It was being used for mold making pretty much, And some people were experimenting with the use of silicone, but at the time, foam latex was still, the number one material to be used. And so they wanted to have strong molds that were large. I mean, the scale that we were doing was large. And so we were making molds that were, as big as cars, if not bigger. And because we did need, some of that scaled down size, but yet big figure pieces for some of the scenes, like having the head where the car drives into the mouth.
So we're talking about big animatronic they made. I think it was like a 1/6 scale animatronic.
Yeah, I guess it was 1/6. And it's funny how 1/6 is kind of like a standard, even with action figures or toy, like statues and stuff that people collect. And but all that stuff was needed to keep certain parts practical. And that's why we had the giant, 1/6 scale of whatever, It was pretty tall, I think it was at least 30 feet. I said, even when I was there, it's like all we could do, we couldn't take pictures. All we could do is just look, and in fact, as a small aside, somebody had snuck in and started taking pictures there in front of everybody, and everybody's like, "Who the hell is that guy?" He just walked in the shop, and he was the guy that was doing car wash, car wash to hire kind of guys, just walk, like spraying people's cars. And the guy all of a sudden sees something cool. He walks in, and he starts taking pictures, and the supervisor is saying, like, "Who the fuck is that guy?" And he said, "Grab that guy," and he takes the guy's camera and he goes, "You didn't see anything. You're not supposed to be in here." And I think just short of like taking a sledgehammer and smashing his camera, he just, he took the guy's camera and just said, "Look, we'll have to return this to you later." And the guy said, "Yeah, but that's my property." He goes, "Yeah, but you're on private property. The minute you walked off the street, and you were already in our parking lot at Sony Studios, you walked into the shop. You broke the law right then and there. So don't tell me." And imagine the leak that would have gotten out. Even as things were still being sculpted. So for us, all we could do is just look and just remember and then come back the next day. So, but everybody was thinking about these things, everything was still being built, I guess the kids, the young hatchlings were there, and there were a lot of them, and those were going to be puppeteered, radio control, animation, live stuff. So, and everything was shot right there, at Sony. Like we would walk over to another stage, and there it is. There's New York City. There's Madison Square Gardens, and there were more than one shot pulled into this. I think K&B had done some stuff also besides Patrick's. And, it was a huge show. So, anyway, fiberglass molds, giant fiberglass molds. And they were epoxy resin based, which was a stronger, better material. And fiberglass is good, but it after a while it breaks down. The heat is really, really taxing on polyester resin. It cracks it, once it hits a certain point. Whereas epoxy resin molds were stronger. They were water resistant. You could even do fiberglass underwater if you needed to, whereas water in itself, if it invades into the polyester resin process, it'll actually completely destroy its adhesive use for binding together, the materials. So they decided to go with this, and at the time, these were the biggest molds I'd ever seen made in the industry. And so, I helped with that stuff. Obviously, there were molds that were made of like the claws and the what do you guys like to call the fins on the back?
Dorsal plates.
Yeah, the dorsal plates. Those were all separate pieces also, and they were done with epoxy resin stuff and mixed with iridescent, so that it had the that shine, that metallic, colorful shine, and that was that kind of stuff. That was things that we were building. We were building, the giant skulls, so that the mechanics could be installed. And then of course the foam rubber skins were put over, and they had to be connected together, seamed, trimmed down, and then blended and covered over so that you couldn't see the seams. So there was a lot of that, and underneath, for the suits that the guys had to wear, spandex suits, so they could have those as bodysuits, and then just for flexibility in movement. And like I said, the prosthetic pieces that were made out of carbon fiber and aluminum and metal, other metals, and then radio control cable controls for eye movements or whatever movements, even the claws on the hands and stuff. So that's pretty much it. And there were at least, I think we had something like 25 mold makers at all times, just working on this. They had their own foam shop that had a crew of like maybe 10 regular people, as regulars there. But then whenever we had to end up putting foam in a mold, it would become a shop thing where all the mold makers were called over, and we would help, when they poured the foam into the molds, we'd brush up the foam, you know, brushes in hand, and we had to make sure that we got it at a the proper thickness, and then allow it to gel, so that they could close the molds together, and then put them in the large ovens. So that was just part of the whole process, but there were a lot of things, a lot of this going on and stuff, and like I said, the claws, the dorsal fins. That was all separate pieces, of fiberglass. I think some of that was done in polyester resin. A lot of the casted pieces. But again, like I said, most of the fiberglass was done in epoxy just because it's stronger. So anyway, any other specific questions that you have?
Well, you've gone into talking a bit about the other people on the set. What was the environment like behind the scenes and working with your crew and all these different shops?
Well, the other shop stuff was farmed out. I believe, if I'm correct, I think it was K&B. They did like the eggs and that the little critters were breaking out of and stuff, and they did a lot of the the eggs, and but they did that stuff at their own shops, and then they would bring those in, because as far as that was concerned, what the eggs look like were not top high security. It was the look of the actual creatures that they were very covetous of. So that's why all of that stayed in-house, at Sony Studios. I don't know if there's really much, like I said, you'll have to ask from this point, about the,
Did you get to see any of the filming of the suits in action?
Some people were allowed to go because they were puppeteering, but in general, the rest of us, we kind of all we could do was just work in the shop and then see footage later if somebody had any, and we go, oh, wow, cool. But that's how secretive it was, unless you were as long as you were, working on set on puppeteering. And, I found that to be a bit ironic because they were doing Taft-Hartley, and Taft-Hartley is that thing where you can't get into the acting union, the Screen Actors Guild, unless you've been on film, but you can't be on film unless you're in the Screen Actors Guild. So it's that weird thing where people who are new, who are being brought in, you accidentally did puppeteering, and so you got fined for doing that, and the fine was you having to pay to get into the union. So it fixes itself, and that was like the in on that. And a lot of these guys were not SAG members, but because they got to work on a majority of the stuff in the shop, it was given as an offer, like, you guys can do some puppeteering, but we're going to have to pay a fine for it, and then you're going to have to join the union. You're going to have to pay the dues. And me, I was an actor already, and so I was already in Screen Actors Guild, so that wouldn't have been a problem. But for some reason, they had already maxed out on how many people that they had already pulled in. So I was hoping that because my status as already being in the Screen Actors Guild, would help. But like I said, they already had people, climbing over each other to get that opportunity, and
Mhm.
and all those people were on the show right from the start. So, I had worked for Patrick Tatopoulos in the past on Stargate, and but on this show, I was called in, you know, later just to help
Mhm.
finish off things. So, but I mean, it was still, I think it was like 5 months or so of me actually being on it, and but I will say, a lot of the time was when it was the hottest months of the year, going right into the summer. So,
Oh,
um,
right.
yeah, yeah. There's pictures, that I have found, because there were hardly any pictures that were allowed out
Mhm.
of us working in the shop. They I've seen the books and the magazines, and you hardly saw any of the the people that were building things. You saw mostly pictures of the designers, and lots of pictures of the mechanics, you know, doing work with the suits and the animatronics for it. But all of the other stuff, like the mold stuff, that was stuff where that wasn't doesn't ever look as glamorous, you know.
Mm.
So you know, I
Yeah,
I
I've only
think
seen a few pictures from magazines with people
yeah, the
sculpting
crew,
them, at doing the mold.
yeah, and that stuff couldn't even get out until after the movie had already
Mhm.
released or just before. But I think the only picture of me on that show was in that big crew photo. And
Yeah, I've been trying
you,
to find like better quality pictures of like the crew behind the scenes stuff. And if you know any pictures of with you in it, I'd love to have them for like maybe a video or
no,
just to share.
no, like I said, man, if you even said camera out loud,
Mhm.
you'd be pulled in the office and thrown out. So people just didn't do that. It's interesting. There's a picture. There's that Life magazine that came out. They've reissued it a few times over the years,
Mhm.
and there's a picture. There's a picture of a guy that's painting, on some of the Godzilla stuff, and we call that guy Danny Bag of Donuts. And this guy, it's a great picture of him painting, but it was just a random photo that somebody picked because he was just standing there with an airbrush. And
Mhm.
and don't get me wrong, but he was one of the guys that was just brought in as an extra hand to help. When the shit hit the fan, of we got to get this shit done. And he's the one guy that I've seen that has gotten the most exposure, just randomly to the public. And so my point I'm making is, yes, there were lots of photos taken, but most of those photos that were taken, if any of them got out to the public, it was in Cinefex magazine.
Mhm.
And they're very careful about what pictures you're allowed to show. So as far as any of us behind the scenes having taken pictures, you know that was that was something tantamount to getting fired.
Yeah.
So people like me and even some of the other people that were photographed, they had to wait until the books and the magazines came out later, just like anybody
Mhm.
else. In fact, sometimes it's like pulling teeth. When they say, "Oh, yeah, just get back with us when after the movie shows," and then you'll go to the office and you'll say, "Hey, can I get some of those pictures?" Oh, we're going to have to take somebody, away from their job just to go look for those pictures and those negatives back then, or the digitals. You know, just get us at a better. There was never a better time. People are
Mhm.
always working. They're always working. So, like I said, it was almost impossible to get pictures unless you were like sculptors or
Yeah.
painters.
I guess.
And it's
That's
tough
really
because
tough.
people like me, we need pictures for our portfolios,
Mhm.
and we can't get them. So I'm just
Yeah.
saying, if people think there's a difficulty in finding photos of certain things, it's because it was top secret at the time. You
Mhm.
know, you know, this was one of the few times that, besides Jurassic Park, where they had a pretty good mix of practical and CG. So that at the time that was like big secret stuff.
Mhm.